embarrassment because I made the entire thing only with photos that I've taken in the field. So if you've ever been in the field with me, you're not safe. Because it's going to be in this, and it's going to be immortalized forever. But when you go through and you look at like the trainings that you're supposed to do, and like one of our forums asks you if you've done the field safety training. Some of you might have done the 90-minute YouTube video, but if you haven't, this is going to replace that. So if you're here right now, feel free to check that off, that you will have done it. So welcome to Field Safety Training 2023. Field days can be quite long. Sometimes you start the day like this, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go, and you end the day looking a little bit like this. So I wanted to talk about how we can be prepared and what we should expect from the field. So to start, let's talk about some typical field activities, things you might be expected to do while you're out there. You might be expected to walk long distances, maybe on a trail, maybe bushwhacking. Oh, sorry, forgot about my animations. You might be expected to bend, crouch, squat, all on the table. You might be wading through deep water or walking on very thick ice or thin ice, depending on what part you're at. Talk to Kylie if you want to know more about that. You might be expected to dig things or sledgehammer. If you need a digging buddy, I highly recommend Valeria. We had a great time. You might be expected to lounge, trip, or collapse into a puddle of joy because you lost the CO2 sensor for about 30 minutes, but then you found it again. Or carry extremely heavy items. Now let's talk about the conditions that we might be doing these activities in. Remember that we're outside when we're doing field work, and most of the time we're in the mountains. And up the canyon, the weather can change really quickly, and it might not be what you expect. So maybe you'll experience all these conditions in the same day. But it's pretty normal in the field to experience rain, snow, sometimes very deep snow, sun, sleet, and bugs. Everybody's favorite weather condition. And I specifically picked these two pictures because that picture was in early March and this picture was in May. And you never know what you're going to be experiencing. So, what types of precautions can we take? Number one, wear appropriate clothing for the conditions that you're gonna be in and the conditions you might not be in. Like I said, weather changes really quickly and it might not be what you think it's gonna be up the canyon. Sometimes what we're experiencing up Spanish Fork is not what we're experiencing here in Provo. Note that I said conditions and not weather. That outfit, it was about 95 degrees and sunny. That was for the bugs. So be smart about what you wear. Number two, take a lesson from Sarah. Do the little things. Wear sunscreen, wear bug spray. If you know that you're allergic to pollen or other things, have your allergy medication. If you need an inhaler, bring your inhaler. Just do the little things to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And then it's always important to have food and water with you. Heidi didn't bring food in the field. She got a little munchie. You never know what's going to happen to you if you don't have food and water. Bring more than you think you'll need.
What implement are you using, Heidi?
She's not in here. That is a auger. Yeah. Okay.
And we've got safety snacks. If you forget them on a given day, take them from the lab area with you.
Great point. Okay, next let's talk about what kind of plants and animals you might come across in the field. This is by no means a comprehensive list of the plants and animals. These are just the ones that I've come across the most and the ones that I think are the most important to keep in mind. Number one, stinging nettle. I hate stinging nettle. And it's so deceiving because every time I see it, I think it's like a wild mint and I get really excited. But look for those. Oh, I hate stinging nettles so much. So just keep your eye out for those. Even if it's warm weather, it's a lot of times a good idea to still wear your waders. If you know that you're going to be bushwhacking and stuff like that, because the last thing you want to do is be brushing up your bare legs against stinging nettle. Same with Russian olive. We have a few sites that have some thick stands of Russian olive trees nearby. Their thorns are so wicked. I hate them. So that's another thing to keep an eye out for. And then thistles, that one on the end. There's a whole town up there where we have sites. It's called Thistle, because we got a lot of thistles. So just be careful where you sit, be careful where you put your hands. It's just, they hurt. So yeah, of course there's other things that are theoretically up there. I've never seen poison ivy, poison oak, those kind of things. So this is just my experience, what I would keep your head on a swivel for. And then as far as animals go, yeah, anything. We've got lots of deer, funky larvae and stuff. This one turns into a moth though, so I hate it. Spiders, snakes. Usually if you see a snake and you're near the water, it's a garter snake, but I have seen rattlesnakes. So it's a good idea to just keep a wide berth from all snakes, right? Fish and tadpoles, if you need help knowing the difference between the two, talk to Heidi. I've never personally seen a cougar, but I've talked to people who were up there hunting cougars at the time, so like they got them up there. Then coyotes, foxes, that kind of thing. The key, of course, to animal safety is just wide berth, right? This is their territory. We're not here to infringe on it, and especially with the deer, coyotes, that kind of thing, just make sure you're paying attention when you're driving. That's when they're the biggest issue. Of course, though, the animal that we're going to but the animal that you're going to come across more than any other when you're in the field are cows. And so some general cow safety. Number one, they're usually really curious about what we're doing, and they're usually friendly, but they're also really skittish. However, if there is a baby cow, just avoid them. That's the advice that I've heard from all of the farmers whose land we have, especially Nebo. That's where this picture was taken. Thanks, Carter. If they have their calves, just don't even go in there. They get protective. We don't want to have anything to do with it. So yeah, direct any of your other cow-related comments to Carter. Okay, next, vehicle safety. So like Ben mentioned, we have two lab vehicles, the Beast and the Bolt. We use both of them pretty frequently. So it's good to just be familiar with what our vehicles are, and I really think the BYU defensive driving course is good. It's really short, does not take very long, but it's a good thing just like have in your mind when you're using a university-owned vehicle. It's just great to have some of their suggestions and tips always in the front of your mind. So definitely renew your defensive driving course. It's also important to remember that like, even when the road conditions are good, we're still on winding canyon roads a lot of the time. There's a lot of blind corners, there's a lot of cows, there's a lot of deer. So keep your head on a swivel. And not all of the roads are friendly to us. Some of them are kind of hostile. So keep that in mind. I also recommend practicing the precautionary principle when driving university-owned vehicles, especially if you're in the Bolt. It has a very low clearance. So just think before you drive onto a surface or try to make a turn.
That one's amazing. I haven't seen that.
Because we were keeping it a secret from them.
I thought enough time had passed. We got out.
It took a long time.
And a lot of brute strength. But yeah, anyways, so practice precautionary principle when you're driving. And all passengers should be paying attention to the road, right? Just like you learn as a missionary, you got the driver and the co-pilot, everyone should be dialed in, and assisting in navigation, especially when we're going to those funky spots and you got weird places you got to turn off. It's really helpful just to have everyone in the car be locked into what's going on. It's also really good to check the gas in the Beast, make sure that the person before you filled it up, and to check the mileage on the Bolt before you go to make sure it's been charged, because the last thing you want to do is get stranded. But if there is an emergency, both of the cars have emergency supplies, jumper cables, and other stuff. So, yeah. To summarize some other just general safety things, always let someone know when you're leaving. We go in pairs as the ideal, and so let someone know who's not going out in the field that you're going to be out in the field. And when you do that, share your location with Ben, with me, with a different manager, just someone who's going to be around and who knows that you're gone. We want to know where you are. Make sure your phone is charged. We have first aid kits, and like Ben mentioned, we have emergency snacks that we can take in the vehicles. Use common sense. Remember that no data is worth your well-being, so if it's dicey, practice precautionary principle once again. I mean, like, we want to have a little stickity-to, a little gumption, right? We don't want to give up really easily, but if it's going to put your safety in jeopardy, don't do it. And then follow spirit. And last but certainly not least, all of this allows us to have fun and enjoy the views while we're out in the field. Does anyone have any labs or field safety questions?
Do you know the name of the site of that last picture on the...
You're not funny.
Sorry, Shannon.
DFL, if anyone was wondering. That is Diamond Fork Lower. And Kylie thinks she's hilarious. This is SFL also, if anyone was wondering.
She kept getting them mixed up, LDF and DFL. We went to them on the same day.
Does anyone have any legitimate field safety questions? I don't trust it.
No, I was gonna say, so there's emergency supplies like a jumper in the, jumper cables in the Beast, but you said there's also something in the Bolt. What do you do if you're just in the Bolt somewhere and you run out of charge?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I feel like that's...
But you just don't do that.
Yeah, I've run into this before. I think I'm the only one who truly has run it empty. Because it'll say it has 0 miles, but you still have a little bit of a buffer there.
Yeah.
Depending on the conditions, that might only be 5 miles, or it could be as much as 15 or 20 miles. So it'll walk you through a list of warnings where it says power is reduced because at a low state of charge. Then it'll say charge immediately, and then it'll start blinking red, and then it's actually dead. The best thing if you were to completely run out and you're not near, you can't make it to a charging station, would be to call BYU's motor pool, and they have a rescue service. They can come out and tow a vehicle if needed. If it's a super short distance or if you're stuck, there's a little eyelet ring that'll screw into the front bumper and a tow cable, tow strap. But that's mainly just to get yourself unstuck if you slide off the side of the road. So again, what Shannon said is key. If you're out of your depth and you're not feeling comfortable with what you're doing, that's a really good sign that you shouldn't be doing it. And so just stop, figure out a way you can get to a place with reception, and call for help.
Good question. Okay, cool. So feel free to check that off on the training form.
And then I wanted to add just one animal safety thing, because there is an animal that you don't see very often but that is around, and that is bear. We have black bear in this region, and it's of all the ones we saw, it's probably the most likely to have an altercation with a bear. And even though, did you all watch that cougar video of the cougar? Was that up? Slate Canyon. That's an amazing video. Don't ever do that. But with black bear, the key, when you are together with somebody else, you're typically highly safe, but you want to be making noise as you move through. If you see a bear and it hasn't yet seen you, then just back away quietly, keep staying together. If a bear is aware of you, then don't leave. Stand there. You can put your backpack or whatever, the YSI on your head, make yourself look a little bigger, make noise, just talk normally, don't panic. almost always the bear will leave. I've had that experience twice, not doing field work, but just in the mountains here. If for whatever reason it doesn't leave, then again, don't run away. You can just stay together and slowly back away until you get to a vehicle or place of safety. If it tries to attack you with black bear, they do occasionally show predatory behavior where they're trying to kill and eat a person. And so the pretending like you're dead does not apply in a situation with the black bear when it's attacking you. Fight back as much as you can. Now again, we have never had any issues with that, but it's just kind of a worst case scenario that wanted to make you aware of. Thanks for the amazing overview. Yeah, Kylie.
I talked to Tom Smith like a lot about bears because I was like kind of working with him, and he said like the number one thing no matter what is to have bear spray. So if you're like really worried about it, I would invest in some bear spray because that's like literally the number one thing that keeps people alive.
And we do have 2 bottles of bear spray. Bear spray also works on other animals. So if there was an aggressive cow or a cougar or a lab mate that you weren't getting along with,
Shoots 40 feet, guys.
Yeah, shoots 40 feet. We have 2 bottles of bear spray. You're welcome to take them with you. Now, bear spray is also not without risks of its own, right? Because especially as you're walking through, or if you fall down, you can puncture the thing or accidentally trigger it. But that's a very edge case. It probably would be a fine idea, especially if you're going far away from the car. A great tool to have. And then the final kind of principle comes from general field safety. And if there are a lot of bugs on its own, that probably isn't like a really serious danger. If you are a little bit tired, it happens to all of us, right? On its own, not a huge danger. If you're worried about the river being high, be careful about that, but on its own doesn't mean you can't go out, right? But when you have multiple risk factors layered on top of each other, things that seem really unimportant can actually become very dangerous. And so think the term that is used is a threat multiplier. And if ever you're feeling compromised or worried about something and then there are multiple things on top of each other, don't ignore that. Pay attention to how you're feeling, how your lab mate is feeling. And then I just wanted to do like a scenario. Let's say that you were out walking to a site and somebody runs into a Russian olive. And this is not at all a joke. There actually was a field tech, not from BYU, but who lost an eye to a Russian olive tree here in Utah. With a thorn coming back and puncturing their eyeball. So let's say that you're walking through, somebody was seriously cut by the Russian olive. What would kind of the appropriate response be? You could either put yourself in a scenario as the one who is injured or as the one who is the co-pilot. Yeah.
Don't you need to really quickly do first aid, but then try to get back to civilization as soon as possible?
Great. So do an assessment and decide, is this something that I can make better here? Or is it something that really I don't have any recourse to do and I need to evacuate and get to the place? That's a great first step of triage. And with this, there probably would be things you can do, right? Take off your shirt and staunch the bleeding, right? And hold that until you can get to a place. Figure out what you can do then, figure out what you need help for. Any other thoughts or things not to do? Yeah.
I would say call for help. If it's not super serious, maybe just call a manager just so someone in the lab knows what's going on.
Yeah.
But if it's a big deal, I don't know, Shannon, if I break a leg, do you want me to be like, you're my first call?
Yeah.
Come and fix it. No, I would say that case I'd call 911, get help, and get back to the road so they can get you.
Perfect. So we sometimes, it's funny, when we're working as a team, that brings a lot of strength and great resources. We forget sometimes that there are these other resources we can draw on. And 911 would absolutely be the right first call to make if it is a serious injury. And then they can direct you. They can even connect and call the people, tell you where to go if you are able to get back to the vehicle. So fabulous. Remember that there are other resources there. You're never going to get in trouble for being too cautious or calling 911, and then you realize afterwards, oh, we probably could have managed. Those people have dedicated their lives to helping protect the safety and well-being of our community.
Something not to do is never panic. It doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you can really assess what to do in the first place.
That's right. So I think it's actually easy to fall off both sides. On one side, you can panic and feel like, oh no, what am I going to do? You're kind of taking it so seriously that you aren't able to act. On the other side, you can pretend like it's no big deal and think, I just rolled my ankle, it's really fine, I'm going to be able to make it there, and not take the time to stop and make an assessment, think about that. So figuring out what the appropriate response is, think clearly. This is why we always go out at least in pairs. Because if you just got seriously injured, I was at I'm a Deacon's Quorum advisor, and we went roller skating the other day. One of the young men fell down, hit his arm, and it really did not look bad. I thought it was totally fine. And plus it was the first time around the roller rink. So I figured, okay, it's fine. Yeah, just go over there, sit down, Sam, you'll be fine. Just 5 minutes later, I could see he was in shock. He was sweating, his pupils were dilated, he was still holding the arm, and we saw that it was broken. You couldn't see visually, but you could tell by his physiological response. He was not in a condition to make that assessment, right? He was compromised, he was feeling that thing. You may be in the same situation. This happened in our lab. There were 2 people out at Spanish Fork Lower, SFL for Shannon. We're going to work on this through time. One of the people, they went under, for those of you who've been to that site, it's kind of under the overpass. They were down, crouching, doing the difficult field things they were doing. After they were done, they'd been there long enough that they'd forgotten that the overpass was above them. They stood up full force and hit their head on the overpass and fell down. It's unclear if maybe they momentarily lost consciousness or not. But that person thought this would be totally fine to continue the day. I just bonked my head. But the other person was carefully watching and intervened and said, no, that was a really serious hit. Because you can have a minor thing that happens, right? A branch scrapes your head and you're really okay. But when you're watching each other, thankfully this other lab member intervened and said, we need to go get you checked out at the hospital. So they got back in the car, said, no, it's totally fine, we can rearrange when we're going to get the stuff. They drove to the nearest hospital, and she got an assessment. It was the exact thing that we wanted to have happen. So you can be that protector and savior and co-pilot for somebody else by thinking about and watching each other. And then it's something that's been mentioned before. There's always it's not a balance, actually, because I don't think you're trading it off. We should always be trying to problem solve. And when something has gone wrong, figure out a way to resolve it, right? And if you don't have cell coverage, then talk together, counsel together, try to figure it out. But never at the expense of your safety. And do be thinking about another positive example. Who's been to what's just above Spanish Fork Middle? It's the super burned one.
Lake?
Yeah, Lake. Has anybody been to Lake, the site? So this has happened 2 times. The road to Lake floods. And it floods to a point where you literally can't see the road. Like it's just under a big sheet of water. And the bolt has this much clearance. And so the groups were sitting there, they're like, it's not that far away. We could probably make it. But I'm glad in both cases that they chose not to push through the water. Now, one of the times they decided that they were going to hike out because it was really high priority. So they changed the plan. They didn't compromise safety or put a major piece of equipment in danger. They said, okay, you know what, we've got the time. It's going to take us 25 minutes each way to hike from here. But that's a good example. And I think that both of the teams made the right call. The other time, when it wasn't a major priority, they said, you know what, this is going to be 50 minutes and then it might be dark by the time. So Remember those risk factors adding on to each other. They made the call just to go on to the next site. So it's going to be a different call each time, and there is real power in counseling together. Okay, didn't mean to blather on for so long. Any final thoughts or recommendations? Yeah.
For if you had like a serious injury, do you call the BYU Health Center or do you just call nearest? I mean, or not, I guess you'd call 911, but where, I guess, would you go ideally?
Great question.
For BYU insurance.
So if it's a non-life-threatening injury, so you know what, I got scratched, or I think I maybe twisted my arm, I'd like to get it checked out. The easiest and usually fastest place to go is the BYU Health Center. You are completely covered in any case. So even if you go to the emergency room at a nearby hospital, you will be completely covered. Don't let that even play into your calculus. So like, how much is this going to cost? Get the help you need. But it is simpler, easier, and lower cost if it's a non-life-threatening thing. Come to the health center. And you can call the BYU health number, which I don't have memorized. I always just look it up. And say, hey, we just had an injury in the field, and then they'll direct you there. However, if there's any question, if it's an edge case, like I'm not sure if we're going to be able to make it back, go to the nearest hospital, right? Just go where you have the safety. And then likewise, don't forget, if you get stuck on the communist road, or if something happens, there are other humans out there in the wild, right? And you can go knock on somebody's house. People are overwhelmingly wonderful and want to help. So get over your inner millennial Gen Z instincts of like only relying on yourself and the internet. Go knock on somebody's door. Hey, we're stuck over here. Could you help us get out? And that could potentially save like a whole day's work of struggling with the thing on your own. So the most important thing is, focus on where that risk is and get the help that you need. And then I do appreciate it if you ever get stuck. Doesn't matter if I'm in a hearing for a lawsuit or anything else. Do call, text. And then for those of you who don't know how to share your location, talk with one of the managers. We usually do that through Google Maps. You can just allow somebody to track you Big Brother style for a number of hours.
I love checking my map and seeing where people are, so share with me. I love that. We live in a cool world. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Just don't let this scare you away from fieldwork if you haven't done it yet. Things usually don't go wrong, and it's so fun. So fun.
Totally. I completely agree. These are the kinds of risks that are just the real world, right? And so learning how to do fieldwork safely is awesome preparation for all kinds of things that you're going to be doing later in your life, even if you don't go into research or management. So awesome opportunities, great experiences. I mean, awesome conversations that happen and relationships that are built as well. So be safe, enjoy it, and we'll get some good science done. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Well, thank you, friends.